a couple of clips from the chat I had yesterday with Moana Tuwhare, a former lawyer, a former treaty lawyer, and she worked on the Ngapuhi papers, which got released over the weekend. And the two big things out of those papers, or the report, I should say, was the Waitangi Tribunal saying that Ngapuhi did not cede sovereignty, which is like of course. But the other thing was the recommendation that all crown land in Northland, or the region that Ngapuhi officially goes to, should be given back to Ngapuhi. So the two big things from the report. It's the public release of the report. It came out a little while ago, but this is the first time the public have had a good look at it. So as a part of the conversation, and this full conversation will be going up on YouTube. It's actually there already. The link is in the description for this video, but I'll make it public probably tomorrow morning. I asked Moana, and this ties into some conversations tonight, is disbanding the Māori Health Authority a breach of the treaty? And we'll play this out. Me and Chewy will go away, and we'll be back to you in a few minutes once he's got through this. And as I said, the full conversation can be seen, heard, listened to on YouTube. A little side note question, because you brought up the Māori Health Authority. As you're saying, Māori didn't cede sovereignty, i.e. Māori have and I sometimes think about, and I don't mean to belittle it or take it too kind of lightly, but the treaty is being a contract. Like if we talk about like contract law, that seems to be an easier way for some people to understand it. Now, if I'm wrong, correct me, but if the contract says Māori have the right to determine their own path and their own sovereignty, does that therefore mean the cancelling of the Māori Health Authority is in breach of that contract, in breach of the treaty, in your opinion?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep, that's a very plain way of putting it, and absolutely the cancelling of the Māori Authority is a breach of the treaty, and there's no doubt that a claim to the tribunal that claims that is going to win, if we still have a tribunal to claim to. So that's really where the problem might lie, is that we may no longer have anywhere to go in terms of a system that will hear us and our vision and our if the tribunal is removed or tinkered with in some way, shape or form, that would be an absolute disaster from my point of view. The tribunal has spent 40 years in the pursuit of analysing all of the claims that have been brought before it. These people are smart. These are some of the sharpest minds in the country, and with a range of backgrounds and experience. So you don't just have, a judge like you might in the mainstream system who's got a background in commercial law or something along those lines. You've got a judge, you've got an expert in tikanga Māori, you've got historian members, you've got, all sorts of skills and knowledge amongst them. And even the mainstream court system will defer to the tribunal and its findings, both findings of fact and often, look to its recommendations in relation to where the justice might sit on a particular issue.
Right.
If it is raised in such a way that the mainstream court system, has to consider that, or should consider that, they do. So they are considered the experts, and they're not just the experts in a national sense, they're the experts in an international sense in relation to how you reconcile and provide for Indigenous rights in a colonised system. And they've, many of the principles of the treaty that have been articulated by the Waitangi Tribunal have been adopted by, the United Nations, for example, in relation to the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. Yep. And, there's been lots of borrowing from the New Zealand example in international arenas. So the tribunal is an amazing forum, and let's not forget that they are not only some of the sharpest minds in the country, but they go through an inquiry, a really thorough inquiry process. So the Crown is represented always. They turn up with all of their, lawyers and all of their witnesses that, also astute, bright people, and they examine on a very, very, minute detail type of thorough basis, then that's why it takes so long. It simply takes so long because there is literally hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pages of material to get through, hundreds and hundreds of witnesses to get through. The forum is open, so anybody can turn up and listen to, how it's conducted. Anybody can access the information if they want to online. So, it's a very transparent and thorough process. To knock, often the tribunal reports, because their findings are mostly recommendatory and they aren't binding on any government, often the reports get shelved and, often they don't go further. But the Māori Health Authority was, directly related to putting into place recommendations made by the Waitangi Tribunal on the state of the health system and how the health system was not delivering for Māori in terms of outcomes and what could be done instead. So going down to the tax and the nuts and bolts of how does it get funded, how does the mainstream system get funded, can a different way of that happening actually achieve better results. And overwhelmingly, all of the health experts that rolled into that inquiry to give evidence, the vast majority were in support of Māori being able to determine the best way forward, because Māori health practitioners know what works and what doesn't. So that's how we ended up with a very concerted effort by the last government to actually implement the recommendation of the tribunal through that health authority.
There you go, Chi. And obviously I've had a good chance to talk to her, so you're welcome to respond. But basically the takeaway is, yes, it will be a breach. And right near the start, if you missed it, she said, and it will be a breach that when challenged in the court will be very easily won. That was the opinion of former treaty lawyer Moana Tuwhare.
Yeah, and anybody that has followed treaty negotiations and treaty settlements and treaty issues being brought in the court would know that. And this is why Seymour is so desperate to reframe the principles of the treaty.
Yeah.
To take that away. There's so much that baffles me about people who struggle to evolve their thinking about what tititi is. And I've noticed a couple of comments in the chat. This is 100% accurate, and I try to do better on this as well. The differentiation between referring to the treaty and tititi, they are two separate documents, and this was the whole idea behind the protest at Te Papa yesterday.
Well, there's actually three. There's actually sort of three. There's the Māori version. There's the English version translated from the Māori version, and then there's the English version. Because the English version, if it's translated straight from the Māori version, says different things.
It's different. Yeah.
Than the English version, and the English version was the one at Te Papa. So it wasn't the English version translated from the Māori version. It was just the English version. So there's sort of unofficially made, but there's sort of three versions.
This is going to devolve into kind of not really a tangent. This is the problem. Like when I saw that story about the action at Te Papa, right? The first headline: people abseil into Te Papa and take spray paint and an angle grinder to the treaty exhibition. I was like, oh, holy shit. That sounds bad. I don't like the idea of someone damaging something in a museum, right? And then I waited for more information, because you can't properly form an opinion until you have more information, right?
Yeah.
And then I saw the main story about why it had happened. And this comes back to why we have so many debates about tititi and about treaty obligations and why Europeans are here in the first place. There is such a disconnect. Everything says, there's the Māori one, and then there's the translation. Of course, that makes sense, right? It's the assumption that it's a direct translation. It's an assumption that the Crown was trying to be fair dealing. You know, why would a people who were living here, who had all of the land,
Yeah.
were existing quite happily, suddenly decide to cede sovereignty, something that is a very European concept, to these people that just turned up?
Well,
Why would just
unpack, just unpack that.
happen?
Unpack that even more, right? So people know 100,000 Māori here at the signing of the treaty, 2,000 Europeans. Does anybody really think that the 100,000 people that were already here went, oh yeah, you tell 2,000 you can run us now. You can be in charge of everything. And the clip we're about to get to talks about co-governance. I'm going to keep my powder dry on that a little bit. But speaking to Moana, she just highlighted what co-governance is in such a better way, and it does come back to those days because the treaty kind of gave that co-governance structure, and the way that we're talking about it today is the opposite. I won't say any more until after the next clip. I'm not cutting short the conversation. Do you want to? You can keep going about the the Waitangi thing.
I want to also, I'm not going to highlight the comment, but there is someone in the chat at the moment that I can literally put a date on when he learned everything that he needed to know about the treaty and Māori, and it was sometime in the mid-80s, and then he just stopped. There's some like he's brought up the blood quantum. He's brought up the fact that Māori signed the document to save themselves from the French. It's just fucking nonsense. And if you don't lock in your opinion, if you leave yourself open to new information and you come at it from a point of view of empathy and just realizing that we're talking about different groups of people here, you will see that ceding sovereignty, a concept that you do not have in the same way that these guys have come from the other side of the planet who had a queen that was chosen by God, and of course everything we do is for her for some reason. That's not the document that they would have signed. There'd be absolutely no reason for it. The French, who had one tiny mission in a completely different part of the country, get fucked. No, old information, dusty, unevolved, and this is why we have this problem in this country, is people will not evolve and they will not learn and they entrench their position. I've seen it. I come from small town South Island. I've seen that point of view for years. And it's just, you keep your mind open. You listen to what these people are saying, and you can see why someone who has, or a group has spent years talking to Te Papa about this, years of following the correct procedure and the official channels to say, hey guys, maybe you're not doing enough to say that this isn't a direct translation, and that is the whole problem, is that you can't have an agreement where the two parties are signing completely different documents. And this is why the UN has come in and says, hey, look, anytime there's one of these colonial agreements, then the one that would have precedent is the one in the native language, not the colonizers one. This is why, because this is something that happens all around the world. We can get this to sign, and then it'll hold up in a European court, and we can entrench our position, and we can build these structures that will ensure European supremacy for hundreds of years to come. We will stack the game in our favor, because of course we will. And all people come back to is like, yeah, but Māori didn't get fucked over as hard as, say, the blacks in South Africa or the Indians. You know, which Indians? Both of them. You know, all of them. So you know, much better that we've got a signed agreement, right?
Yeah.
Oh, outdated, dusty thinking.
Yep.
And that's what this government is going to try and go back to.
But in saying all of that, we support the protesters mostly because look at what they're wearing. I mean, you know, I don't mean to take the level down, to tone down a bit or two, but you know, they're obviously high class individuals. With
I got several messages about that. And yeah, your vibe attracts your tribe. Good stuff.
So let's go to this last clip, or it may not be the last clip. I've actually got two, but we might get a bit late. So we'll definitely play one more. But this is the conversation that I had with Moana about co-governance, right? And about what it means and what it is, and what it was when we started this journey together. We being the two peoples, or the Māori and the Crown, started this journey together. Let's jump to this conversation. We'll see you in a few minutes. I'm also really confused. Now, there might be an easy answer to this, but you speak about Hobson, so I think straight away of the Don Brashes of this world and the Hobson Pledge. And I think about, David Seymour and these people who are all saying, Māori absolutely ceded sovereignty. Yet, from what you're saying, is that for the past 10 years, it's been known by everybody and it's been clear to everybody that they did not cede sovereignty. How does that work itself out, like in public discourse, like how New Zealand's actually going to operate from here going forward?
Yeah, that's a very complicated answer, only because, it's simple to us. If I give you a Ngapuhi view of the world, that might be a little bit more straightforward. But the fact of the matter is that if we took a strictly English language version of the treaty, interpretation to the treaty and application of the treaty, then we are looking down the barrel of absolute undisturbed possession of all resources are to be retained by Māori, unless we have willingly given that up, which means we control all of the water, we control all of the land, all of the resources that we would not willingly give up. It remains in Māori control, and some of those resources obviously have long been in the possession of non-Māori in the country, but some resources like the water are not. And so if you want to take the position that co-governance is a Pākehā compromise, you should really be looking at it from the other end of the spectrum, which is actually that's Māori compromising to co-govern a resource that we never agreed to give up in relation to the water. So that's a much more, opposite end of the spectrum than most of us would really be prepared to take it, because what we are hoping to build in this little nation of ours is a environment in which, all people, no matter who you are, where you're from, have the ability to be part of the system in a really meaningful way. So that's where those two, co-governance is one word for it, but where the two spheres of influence overlap. All right, so that overlaps in so many realms across so many ways now in 2023, and will continue to overlap in so many ways in the future. We are committed as Ngapuhi and as descendants of those original signatories and to the vision that they held in 1840 to a strategic partnership and alliance here. We are committed to that relationship, and we're not going anywhere. We'll still be here in 180 years, and we'll still be here in 800 years, and the treaty partner will come and go, probably on a 3-year cycle if we're lucky. This treaty partner will be out in 3 years, so will the people, in terms of immigration and the sort of ebb and flow of the wider people of Aotearoa. So, but to go back to your question, what does it mean? Well, for us, it means that we get the ability to make the calls for ourselves. The Māori Health Authority was an attempt to basically provide Māori with the necessary resources and infrastructure to deliver on Māori health in the way that we saw fit, because we honestly and truly believe, and the research shows that by Māori for Māori is a much more effective approach. And so we will hold on to the fact that not only did we not cede sovereignty and continue to push that in terms of a constitutional discussion, around the way in which decisions get made in this country, and the way in which the power continues to be imbalanced, and how do we rebalance that relationship so that there isn't this constant imbalance and interfering with our ability to get on with doing the best we can for our people.
There you go. So how I heard that, I mean, there was lots said in that conversation, but the biggest thing I took away from it was we're being told by those up the front at the moment about co-governance is that it's the Crown unfairly inviting Māori to the table to give them an unfair advantage. But actually, the way it started off, 100,000 Māori, 2,000 Europeans, it was actually Māori allowing the settlers, allowing the Crown to come to the table and co-govern. So what we're being told and what we're being said from the front from various political parties at the moment is all about, why are the Crown giving Māori quote unquote special rights or giving them a seat at the table when they don't deserve it? It's actually Māori, it's the Māori's table. The table belongs to Māori. So co-governance, that's what it is. It's their table. And actually they're the ones, as Moana said, who are compromising. It's a Māori compromise saying you can come to the table. So the way we're talking about co-governance now is just upside down and backwards and puts a completely different spin. Just come back to that thing, 100,000 Māori, 2,000 Europeans. Of course, Māori had to go, you can come to our table. You can come and run the place with us because we're the dominant force. And it took 20 years, Chewie. I looked at it today. It took 20 years from 1840, I think it was about 1859, 1860, when Europeans were all of a sudden more than Māori. And since then, they've never looked back. And I think what's happened is Europeans, the Crown, whatever, have taken on board the quote-unquote rights that Māori had when the document was signed. But you don't get to do that. You don't get to have a contract and then go, oh, we'll just take on your role now and you can take on ours. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. You don't get to change the contract based on your personal circumstances. It is what it is. So I found that enlightening, Chewie, that thought.
Yeah. I mean, those early colonial days, right, with Europeans starting to arrive in numbers, at that point, Māori were traveling the Tasman to keep New South Wales fed. It's crazy stuff like that I didn't find out until sometime in the last 10 years. We don't learn about that. We learn European colonial history. We don't learn Māori history. It just baffles me every time I see people concerned about any sort of redress or co-governance or the fact that Māori might get a bigger say in how this country is run and managed. I just see fear, and it's fear that that somehow Māori are going to just turn all of our tricks on us. That we've stacked the deck for a couple of 100 years, so that they're going to, turnaround's fair play, right? Whereas every time, like I heard it in their interview, we want to share, we want to collaborate, we want to be an alliance, but the only place that those things come from is level ground, and we don't have it. You look at the New Zealand company and how it flooded this country with Europeans trying to get away from England. But you read how they got the land for those Europeans. This was a company that was scamming both sides. The people coming here, the Crown, the Māori that were already here, and we're still dealing with it. Because we can't be honest about these things, because our history books have been telling us the wrong thing for fucking 80 years. Because the attitudes of Bob in the chat are reflected by so many people who got to a point where, yep, that sounds right. The people that look like me are on top. I'm okay with that. One of the comments, I'm going to go back to it because someone used a word to describe me that sometimes I have real trouble with.
Angry.
Paula here put up, Jingo Shui, I would love to have you in one of my treaty workshops. This is the language of patriots. Gotta love you. That word patriot is a hard one. Like
Because of America?
I
Is that why? Because of the American?
Because of so many people that go, I'm patriot. But I love this country. I love the history of this country, of everyone that's here, of the things that everyone from this country has done. And this is why I get so head up, and I have so much trouble with people that want to be patriotic about one part of this country, the one part of the history of this country, and they want to shit on the other part. Like when people talk about one country, one people, they want to erase one of those people. That's not how that works. We can be from one country with different backgrounds, different history, but we're all here. And there's nothing that's going to undo that. Māori aren't going to put us back in the boats and send us back to England, but we need to get past this. And it might be an uncomfortable conversation, and you might have to sit back and go, well, maybe these ideas that I've had, possibly since I was a kid, maybe they're wrong. Maybe I need to review them. If you can't do that, then you're not coming at this with intellectual honesty.
The idea of one people, when people are saying that, what they're saying is be like us. It's the most dog whistly thing in the world. And I've said the story before. When people used to say that to me when I was on Talkback, I would always say, there's three ways we can be like one people. I mean, they can be like us, we can be like them, or you can meet somewhere in the middle. And mostly those people who go one people, we should be one people, no division, one people, they're not the ones trying to meet in the middle or trying to be like them. Because if the one person that needs to become acclimatized is a let's say they're a migrant to the country, because that's often the talk on ZB you hear about. It's like, well, how often have you invited that person into your house to help them acclimatize? How often have you gone into their house to be one of them? One people doesn't mean anything other than, from most of those people, be like us. And you know what? I don't want to be one people. I actually like a multi-pot of ethnicities and opinions. But how boring one people would be. Now, if they're being intellectually honest and they're meaning one country, one citizenship, cool. But they don't. They actually mean be like us, act like us, smell like us, eat what we eat, agree with our opinions. And I don't want that. I'm not interested in that whatsoever.
We've got a European style of government. We have a European style of courts. We do things the way that they do in England. And so many of our things, that's where the core bedrock of how this country's system works. And in that time that's worked, what have we done? We've wrecked the environment. We've shit up all our rivers. We've made people hungry. We've pit people against each other. Like, where is the problem with going, well, maybe there's another way? Maybe the people that were here first might have some ideas about how to better manage things. And I'm not saying that we're going to completely wind back the clock to 1840. I'm just saying, why can't we include the people that we signed a document with to say, why don't we share this country? Why don't we try that? Like, we have. This is the thing. Over the last 40 years, we have done more. And we've got better. There's more Māori being spoken now than ever before. As much as Winston wants to say that there's only 5% fluent, we don't all have to be fluent. People didn't say kia ora as much as they do now. There's more words and phrases being learned every day because you see it more every day. You see more Māori business. You see more brown faces in places that were just whites only. Now, we might not have put a sign on it that said whites only, but we may as well have. And if you're a Māori person or a Pacific Island person or someone from Southeast Asia or India, why shouldn't you be able to see a doctor that knows you, knows your history, your upbringing? I'm a man. Do I have to see a male doctor? Do I have to see a white one? Like, that'd be crazy for someone to tell me that that's what I had to do, right?
Yeah. Or maybe the opposite would be you have to see a female doctor. That's kind of what it feels like. You have to see something that you're not right.
That's a better way, probably what I meant to say. But yeah, exactly.
I think as well that this whole kind of one nation, one citizenship thing, the reason that that's also bullshit is this, right? And I've said this lots through my sort of broadcasting career, and I've said it on the show. So if you've heard this, I apologize. But arrogantly, I really think people need to get to terms with this. It doesn't matter if you're not Māori. The Māori story is a part of your story. Because if you're a part of this country, if you consider yourself a part of this country, then the Māori story is a part of your story. You don't have to be blooded into it. You don't have to be part of an iwi, but the Māori story is an integral part of this country. So if you're of this country, it's a part of your story. And if you reject that, then you're not getting all that this country can offer. And so many of those people that are like One Nation or that are that sort of thing, so many of those people reject that story. And if you reject that story, I'll just put it this way, you're not a real New Zealander, because that story should be a part of every New Zealander's story.
100%. And that's why I get so wound up about these things. Like, Pat, you know how much of a follower of sporting.
Do you get wound up?
I am, right?
I've never seen you wound up.
I've got very wound up tonight, I must admit. You know, I'm a keen follower of sports ball.
Yes, we like sports ball.
Yeah, very much so. Even someone that doesn't follow rugby, doesn't give two shits about it, to be fair, cannot sit there and watch a haka and not feel that surge of wah.
Yeah, of course.
You know, and because I get the same thing when I hear bagpipes. I get the same thing when I hear the last post. You know, the things that mean something to me as a New Zealander. And I can't imagine those things being taken away. I've traveled. I've spoken to people from other countries and other cultures and that sort of thing. And it is those Māori things that get brought up with New Zealand, because they're exclusive to us. They don't exist anywhere else in the world. That made me proud when I was traveling.
Yeah.
That's something that people didn't need to know much about me, apart from the fact that I was a New Zealander. That's something that I could hark back to. This is why you have so many people on their OE in London all get together and rip out a pretty mediocre haka, but they're doing it right. That's why when I see Māori imagery on a memorial somewhere overseas, it means something. When I see a Māori name on a gravestone somewhere in Belgium, that hit me. They're not my people, but they are.
Yeah.
And I don't see, like, when people talk about division, do they not see this? Am I crazy, or are they crazy? Are they seeing a completely different version of this country than I believe in?
I think that's what it partly is. And I think you often use that phrase, European supremacy, and meaning literally the culture we have been brought across from Europe. That's how at least I interpret it. And there are people who are still bound into that. And as I said earlier, in my opinion, haven't taken on all that this country could offer them, because the indigenous people, and I've said this before as well, you were just kind of saying at the end, Chewy, really the only thing that differs us from any other country in the world are the indigenous stuff, the animals, the plant life, and the people. Or else we're bloody Sydney, Bondi Beach, or we're bloody Cape Town, or we're probably maybe not the climate, but we're the UK. So that's the only thing that separates us from the rest of the world. So to not bring it into you and have it as a part of you, as I said, you're missing out on what New Zealand really is about. That's it. That's it,
yeah,
Chewy.
And I mean, like, European supremacy, I know people get really uncomfortable with that phrase because it's one step away from white supremacy. But I mean, it permeates everything. Like, I remember having a brief conversation with someone in the chat the other day about, Greeks inventing democracy. And that is a bedrock of European, of course the Greeks came up with something, and Europe based its everything from what the Greeks did. But you cannot tell me that a group of people getting together and agreeing on something didn't exist before the Greeks came up with it. The Greeks wrote it down. You know,
Yeah.
but it's this idea that someone in Europe did it first. Absolutely. It's why we obsess about the Greek civilization. It's why we obsess about the Romans. You know, it is European history. There's more to it than that. The biggest civilizations that grew up in Africa. We don't talk about that. We don't talk about the fact that, yes, Europeans were technologically more advanced than Māori, but Māori had already traveled like a third of the planet.
Yeah.
You know, at the same time that Māori were doing that, people were eating each other in Europe. Like, don't hold up Europe to be this bastion and this shining city on the hill. Yes, every culture on this planet has something to offer. We have something unique.